Hey, George with Latino Review. How are you, man?
Hey, George. Oh, great.
So I missed Sundance this year, and now I'm pissed because everyone's talking about how awesome this movie is. What did I miss? Because I don't know a lot about it here, so I gotta, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Splice is, you probably know the premise. It's about two young geneticists who create hybrid organisms for a big pharmaceutical company, and then covertly decide to add human DNA into the mix. And
why not?
As they naturally would.
Sure.
And terrible, terrible things result from this. But when I describe the film in that way, it definitely sounds like, I think, movies you've seen before. I think, hopefully, the film veers off in a slightly different direction. And I suspect that part of the film's success at Sundance had to do with the fact that the movie went to places that people weren't expecting. Or if they were anticipating it, they were amazed that the film actually did go there, that it kind of kept its pact with the audience.
Were you worried that people might compare it to like a Species or something like that?
You know, it's so funny because people bring up Species all the time.
Yeah.
And I've got to confess, that was never... the film is absolutely influenced by other directors' work and other writers and
Oh, I'm not saying
artists
that you thought of it while you were doing this, but
Yeah.
it's just like the perception
but
from
people
out,
bring
yeah.
up Species all the time. So I tip my hat to David Cronenberg and James Whale, and those guys are real influences. Species absolutely was not, and that's a fun B movie. But I think when people actually see Splice, they'll realize that there's very little common ground between those movies, because Splice, unlike Species, unlike a lot of creature movies, is not about the creature escaping and wreaking havoc in the world. Mm-hmm. It's about the relationship that the creature has to her creators. And that relationship gets quite complicated and quite Freudian and weird, and definitely goes to places that I think very few, if any, creature films have gone before.
What Latino Review readers, when it comes to horror, what they want to know is how much sex is in this movie.
There's sex in this movie, I promise you. And it's weird sex.
Was it weird sex?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I can think of weirder sex, but I'm sure there's I'm sure there's room to expand, but
you're telling me someone's getting it on with the creature then?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's just the beginning.
Oh, okay.
Well, I don't want to build it up too much, but no, absolutely, that was the raison d'etre to make this film for me. I mean, without the sexual component, I wouldn't have been interested. I think that, and not just because it's sensational, but because that seemed like a natural part of the story. I mean, the prime directive of any life form is to procreate.
Right.
And so when you start talking about creating hybrid organisms, as we already are in the real world, and possibly the creation of an animal-human hybrid organism, the question of sex is going to come up. And added to that is the fact that I feel these archetypes of hybrid humans, which have existed in mythology for thousands of years, are very present in our minds even now. And the idea that we could now take those notions, those mythical notions, and make them a reality opens a door to how we would respond to them as human beings, not as scientists, but as human beings. And that's why the film is about the human relationship between the scientists and the thing they make. It doesn't take long for them to develop an emotional connection to Dren, which is the name of the creature in the film. And inevitably, it's very complicated because the creature grows quickly, and the people who have made her, while they're very smart, they're very clever, they're brilliant at what they do, they understand the chemical building blocks of life. They don't really understand what life is. They don't understand the essence of it, and that's where things go wrong.
Well, speaking of opening doors, how have doors been opening for you now that this movie is going to get released nationwide?
Well, it's been good. I mean, it's really, it helps. It helps.
Yeah.
I think, especially now, it's a very tough climate for independent filmmakers. And
are you going to stick with horror?
Well, yeah. I mean, definitely. I love fantasy, horror, and science fiction. I don't have any desire to really leave that zone. So all the things I'm working on are related to those genres. Are
you working on something right now? Are you writing anything, or?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I've been, believe me, I've been working on a number of things for years. One of them is an adaptation of a J.G. Ballard novel called High Rise. Okay. Which I'm very keen to make. Also, there's a children's book series called Tunnels that I'm working on.
What's Tunnels? What is that?
Tunnels is a really fascinating premise. It's about a kid whose father's an archaeologist who disappears underneath the bowels of London.
Oh, I've read about that. Yeah.
And he goes chasing after his father, and he finds that there's a whole civilization down there, and it's a civilization really that's partly human, but it's in fact what he finds is a human colony that's dominated by a quasi-humanoid colony, and it's something I've been wanting. It's the kind of thing I've been wanting to work on for a long time. It's really a large-scale. I don't want to say fantasy because it doesn't have magic in it, but it's sort of a large-scale fantasy epic type story. And all of my films have been limited to really just a few characters because that's all I could afford.
Right.
But this is big. This is a much larger canvas.
Great.
And it's really cool. It delves into. I'm like really into even though this is a big film, it's still a hermetic world, and I'm very much into those kind of universes. So.
Cool. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing Splice, and I wish you the best of success, man.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
I really appreciate it.
Take care.
So now you're doing that all on your